Sterilization was also a high priority for eugenicists. Indiana kickstarted the trend of sterilization laws for undesirables, including asylum patients and criminals in 1907. 32 states would pass similar laws over the following years. By far, the most extensive was in California, where some 20,000 people were sterilized before it was repealed. As a result, the number of sterilizations in the U.S. tripled between 1904 and 1921, mostly applying to criminals, mentally ill patients, and minorities. In 1927, the Supreme Court upheld Virginia's compulsory sterilization law in the case of Buck v. Bell, arguing that sterilization of mental asylum patients were permitted under the Constitution as these people were deemed contrary to the protection and health of the state. The case started when then 18-year-old Carrie Buck, who had been committed to an asylum in Virginia because of prostitution and drug use, along with a medical classification of moron or below normal intelligence. She had also become pregnant as a teen, possibly due to rape. The court opinion decided that her welfare and that of society will be promoted by her sterilization. Carrie was forcibly sterilized shortly after, but was eventually released and lived until 1983. She went on to have a fairly normal life, and her family and friends never noticed any signs of the mental deficiencies that the asylum doctors had believed were so bad that she had to be removed from the gene pool. Even when sterilization was not mandatory, it was often encouraged or incentivized towards poor, mostly non-white women. Doctors were known to lie to patients about the sterilization being reversible. Other women reported being threatened with reduced or removed welfare payments unless they were sterilized. Reports of this nature continue into the 1970s in some southern states, mostly for black women. In Puerto Rico, as many as 1/3 of all women were sterilized between the 1930s and 1970s to try to control the population there, and as many as 40% of all Native American women were sterilized in the first half of the 1970s. Sterilization laws remained in place for decades, only fading out slowly as eugenics lost ground. Although the Supreme Court ruled in Skinner v. Oklahoma in 1942 that compulsory sterilization of criminals was unconstitutional, other forms were still commonplace long afterwards. An estimated 60,000 to 70,000 people were forcibly sterilized under American eugenics laws, and many more underwent procedures with dubious consent. While men were sometimes sterilized, the vast majority of these were performed on women. Forced sterilization gradually lost support after the 1940s, but it clung on for a while through the advocacy of men like Clarence Gamble. In 1947, Gamble, heir to the Procter & Gamble Soap Company, funneled his wealth into the Human Betterment League of North Carolina to advocate sterilization of minorities and the poor who placed a larger burden on state welfare. Similar groups emerged in other states, and it wasn't until 1977 that North Carolina ended the sterilization policies that his group advocated for.
Those lucky enough to survive are essentially mutants bred for the purpose of hunting these monsters. Their entire physiology changes. They now have enhanced speed, strength, reflexes, and endurance, which allows them to chase and kill creatures non-witches wouldn't stand a chance against. Their wounds heal at an accelerated rate, and their boosted immune system makes them immune to most forms of disease. This also accommodates for the large amount of potions they consume, allowing them to augment their own abilities without fear of a chemical overdose. These potions sent them into a trance or frenzy during combat, allowing them to ignore pain and continue fighting even if severely wounded. Changes to their sensory system means they can identify and track what creature they're hunting by the mere scent of their blood. The most iconic of these sensory mutations are the cat-like eyes, which allow them to see in extreme light and darkness. Another side effect of this mutation is an extended lifespan, allowing witches to live for centuries in some cases while still maintaining a youthful appearance. So if witches can live for so long, it's not unreasonable to ask why they don't just breed a bunch and pass these traits down to their children, removing the need for the trial of the grasses in the first place. Well, that's not really an option. The entire process of becoming a witcher makes them sterile, so they need to select children from the outside to undergo these trials. Another side effect that comes from the trial of the grasses is a stunt in their emotional growth. Many consider witches as emotionless monsters unable to feel empathy, but we see enough from Geralt, especially in the games, to suggest that this may not be true. From a very young age, these children are taught to control their emotions. If you also consider that they are trained to be cold-blooded killers, who have seen and experienced horrors normal folk could only imagine, being able to detach yourself emotionally seems to be the only way to remain sane. It also makes it easier to deal with humans refusing to pay for their service. I think it's more of a case of witches choosing not to show emotion because remaining calculated and disciplined is what keeps them alive. It also may be interpreted as a sign of weakness, which they are certainly not. It really just depends on the individual. In order to hunt and kill monsters, they had to transform themselves into something that many labelled as non-human. It creates a dynamic where the people need the witches, but there's always that fear that when the monsters are gone, they'll be left with the ones they created themselves. And this idea of a lack of emotion and empathy only further perpetuates this fear. With the threats to humans diminishing over the years, the need for witches was also greatly reduced. However, this meant attentions then turned to the witches, who along with their schools were attacked by those who opposed the use of magic. To summarize, witches are essentially mutated super soldiers.
You're one of them. The mages Tomas mentioned who make witches. You don't look ancient.
Mages age quite slowly. Witches do too. Gives us both decades to hone our respective skills. The trials are only part of my duty, though. Don't fear. It's merely a side effect of its hybrid genes. Frolics. I've identified 3 different species in this specimen to pick up. It's a nasty little crossbreed.
Master Deglan said monsters can't mate with other species.
True, though they can be engineered. Imagine an army of beasts designed to wipe out the elves and the old races, to secure land and food. The alchemy was inelegant, though. Most crossbreeds died instantly.
Mages made monsters, then made witches to kill them?
Today, my mages and I guard the secrets to such mutagenic alchemy, preventing further abuse. I'm Rydrick, by the way.
Are you daft, Rydrick?
A witcher deserves to understand its place in history.
Kitsu's been kidnapping them. Yes. Experimenting on the girls. She's using some strange alchemy to try to change them.
Change them to what?
Into whatever she's become. I tracked her here, tried stopping her, but Kitsu's power.
And she just let you live?
I understand if that's a concept unfamiliar to your kind. If Kitsu was using sorcery to try and mutate those girls, who mutated her?
Her genes were spliced with those of Amar. It explains her unnatural power. She's a crossbreed.
How is such a thing possible?
The same way he was made. Mutagenic alchemy. Its secrets known only to mages at Kaer Morhen. You're behind all this.
That's ridiculous. Hunting monsters for coin wasn't enough. Now you make them.
Witches are struggling, yes, but...
Shame. Few new beasts would be good for the business.
More monsters, more jobs, more coin. Another sharp con.
I swear, Phil, I didn't...
To tell you stories where breathtaking magic, fantastic creatures, and age-old prophecies are interwoven with religious fanaticism, war crimes, even racism.
See her ears, she-elf.
However, this land is brimming with conflict. Racial hatred often erupts into violence.
To those of you who do not know, we are joined tonight by Miss Charity Burbage, who until recently taught at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Her speciality was Muggle studies. It is Miss Burbage's belief that Muggles are not so different from us. She would, given her way, have us mate with them. To her, the mixture of magical and muggle blood is not an abomination, but something to be encouraged.
You lied to me.
You couldn't know the truth. Not until you had your powers. Not until I was sure.
Sure of what?
Sure you were a Viltrumite.
So if I wasn't, I'd just be one more human to conquer? No, this doesn't make any sense. You love me. You love Mom. I know you do.
Do you have any idea how long we live? The older we get, the slower we age. Viltrumite DNA is so pure, you're nearly full-blooded.
Malfoy. He called Hermione... Well, I don't know exactly what it means.
He called me a mudblood.
He did not.
What's a mudblood?
It means dirty blood. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born, someone with non-magic parents, someone like me. It's not a term one usually hears in civilized conversation.
See, the thing is, Harry, there's some wizards, like the Malfoy family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood.
That's horrible.
Rudolf Jung not only outlines the very early history of the National Socialist movement, but he also straight up tells us which god they worshipped. Let us quietly leave the desert god Yahweh, that spirit of destruction, to the Jews. Ours is called the All-Father. I cannot emphasize how important this sentence is. It just cracks open the safe and reveals what's inside. But who is the All-Father? Well, it's Odin. Odin, the one-eyed All-Father. Odin has many names and is the god of both war and death. A solid gold swastika disc is the oldest known reference to Odin of Valhalla, the Norse god of war and death, says archaeologists. And there it is, right there. You can look it up online. There's multiple sources saying that the symbol of the swastika is associated with Odin. Odin is, therefore, primarily the god of death, but also of war, and the swastika is associated with him. Now, I've said before that I couldn't understand why they chose the right-handed version of the swastika rather than the left-handed version. This was a mystery that none of the historians seemed to know, and I couldn't figure it out either. Well, now that we know it's Odin, the god of war and death, it makes perfect sense. In May 1919, Kron wrote a memorandum in which he proposed the left-handed swastika, i.e. clockwise in common with those of the Theosophists and the Germanenorden, as the symbol of the DAP. He evidently preferred the sign in this direction on account of its Buddhistical interpretation as a talisman of fortune and health, whereas its right-handed, i.e. anti-clockwise counterpart, betokened decline and death. Hitler insisted that the National Socialist swastika be right-handed, which would symbolize decline and death. Odin is the god of death, and Rudolf Jung confirms that the National Socialist god is Odin. So it makes perfect sense why Hitler chose the right-handed version of the swastika. It represented his god. The swastika is Odin's symbol.